there is a quiet problem that sneaks up on people. It doesn't hurt at first. It doesn't shout. It just whispers. Maybe you start waking up once at night to pee, then twice, then 3 times. Maybe you notice you can't hold it like you used to. Or you map every bathroom in every mall, airport, or restaurant because you're secretly afraid of leaking if you're too far away from a toilet. Most people think, that's just age, or that's just how my body works now. But very often, it isn't just age. It's years of tiny, everyday habits that quietly trained your bladder to misbehave. I'm Dr. Catherin Harris, and in this video, I want to talk to you like I would talk to one of my own patients in the office. No fear tactics, no shame, no magic tricks. Just something most people have never been taught. Your bladder is listening to your routine. What you drink, how you sit when you pee, how you breathe, how you handle stress. All of it is sending signals to this small but powerful organ. Over time, those signals can either protect it or slowly destroy its balance. As you listen, I want you to do something important. Don't just think, that's interesting. I want you to quietly scan your day and ask, do I do that? Is this me? Because you'll probably recognize yourself in at least one of these habits. And the good news is this: if habits helped create the problem, habits can also help you change the direction. Let's start with one of the most common things almost everyone does without thinking: chronically holding your pee. You're busy, you're in the middle of a meeting, you're on a long drive, you're watching a show, scrolling on your phone, working at a desk, and you feel the urge to go. Instead of pausing, you tell your body, later. You tighten your muscles a little bit, distract yourself, let the urge pass. Maybe you do this not once, but 5, 10, 20 times a week. On the surface, it feels like nothing. Your bladder didn't explode, you didn't have an accident, life moves on. But here's what's happening beneath the surface. Your bladder is a muscular sac. Throughout the day, it slowly fills with urine, and the nerves in the bladder wall send messages to your brain: we're getting full. Sometime soon, we'll need to empty. When everything is healthy, you feel a gentle urge, you have time, you go to the bathroom, you relax the pelvic floor, the bladder muscle contracts, and you empty. The system works like a well-rehearsed team. But when you repeatedly delay and delay and delay, you're training your bladder to stretch beyond what it comfortably wants. You're telling those nerves, your signals are not important. Be quiet. Over time, this can disrupt the sensitivity of the bladder. For some people, it leads to a bladder that doesn't empty completely. For others, it flips the other way. The bladder becomes jumpy and overactive, sending intense, urgent signals, even when there isn't much urine inside. Think of it like a balloon. If you constantly overstretch it, the rubber doesn't snap back as tightly. A very overfilled bladder can also increase the risk of infections, because urine that sits too long can become a breeding ground for bacteria. I am not telling you to panic every time you wait 10 minutes. Life happens, but if holding it has become your default, if you regularly push off bathroom breaks for hours, your bladder is carrying the cost of that habit. On the opposite side, there is another habit that quietly trains your bladder in a different but equally damaging direction: going just in case all the time. This is the person who pees 3, 4, 5 times before leaving the house. They go just in case when they arrive somewhere, just in case before bed, just in case whenever they pass a bathroom. It feels like being prepared. It feels smart and safe. But here's the catch. Every time you empty your bladder when it's only a little bit full, you teach your brain and bladder that even small amounts of urine mean, we have to go now. Over time, the threshold drops. Instead of your bladder calmly holding a normal volume, it starts screaming at a quarter tank. You get urgent messages like, go now or you'll leak, even when there isn't much there. That's why some people with overactive bladders feel a strong urge every hour or even every 30 minutes. They didn't do anything wrong. They just built a habit of peeing too frequently, and their bladder learned to behave like a tiny, impatient child. The goal is not to ignore urges until you're in agony, but to find a healthy middle ground, not constantly emptying a nearly empty bladder and not ignoring a full one for hours. Now let's talk about what you pour into your bladder every day. Many people think, I don't drink much water because I don't want to pee all the time, and they live in a state of low-level dehydration. Their urine is dark, concentrated, and strong-smelling. What they don't realize is that this concentrated urine can be far more irritating to the bladder lining than a healthy, diluted urine. Imagine the difference between a mild saltwater solution and a thick, harsh one. Your bladder is lined with delicate tissue. When urine is consistently very concentrated, it can make the bladder feel more sensitive, trigger urgency, and, in some people, contribute to infections and stones over the long term. So the habit of, I'll protect my bladder by barely drinking, often does the opposite. A healthier approach is steady, moderate hydration throughout the day. That doesn't mean chugging huge bottles at night or forcing down liters of water if you have heart or kidney issues. It means listening to your body, aiming for urine that is usually pale yellow rather than dark, and spreading fluids out instead of binge drinking all at once. Then we have the classic irritants: caffeine, sodas, energy drinks, and certain acidic or spicy foods. Coffee, tea, cola, energy drinks, these are woven into modern life. Caffeine itself can increase urine production and stimulate the bladder. For some people, this isn't a big deal. For others, especially those already dealing with urgency or leakage, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Add carbonation, artificial sweeteners, and a lot of sugar, and you have a perfect storm of potential irritation. Again, there is no universal rule that everyone must quit caffeine forever. But if you notice that your bladder is worse after certain drinks, that isn't your imagination. Day after day, year after year, these habits quietly strain a system that is already under pressure. Sugary drinks and juices can also play a role. They don't just affect your bladder directly. They impact your weight, your blood sugar, and your overall inflammation levels. Extra body weight increases pressure on the bladder and pelvic floor, which we'll talk about in a moment. So that daily habit of multiple sweetened drinks isn't just about calories. It's about what that constant metabolic load means for the organ that's trying to hold and release fluid 24 hours a day. One of the most underestimated enemies of bladder health sits in your gut: chronic constipation. Your rectum and your bladder live side by side in a small pelvic space. When the rectum is consistently full of hard stool, it pushes against the bladder, interrupts how it fills and empties, and can even affect the nerves they share. For some people, untreated constipation shows up as urgency, frequency, or feeling like the bladder never empties completely. You can treat the bladder from the top all you want, but if the bowels are never addressed, the problem keeps coming back. Think of the many everyday habits that lead to constipation: low fiber intake, barely drinking water, ignoring the urge to have a bowel movement, sedentary days in front of a screen, eating quickly and on the go. None of these seem directly related to your bladder, but over months and years, they create a congested, tense pelvic environment where both your gut and your bladder struggle. Focusing on regular soft stools through better hydration, more fruits and vegetables, whole grains as tolerated, movement, and honoring bathroom urges is actually a bladder-protecting habit, not just a digestive one. Let's move down to the muscles that quietly hold everything together: your pelvic floor. These muscles form a kind of hammock at the bottom of your pelvis, supporting the bladder, uterus or prostate, and rectum. They help you hold urine in when you need to and relax so you can empty. 2 everyday habits quietly weaken this system: a sedentary lifestyle and chronic repeated straining. When you sit for long hours with poor posture, slouched, pelvis tucked under, core totally disengaged, your pelvic floor doesn't get the varied, healthy activation it needs. Add extra body weight, particularly carried in the abdomen, and you're putting constant downward pressure on that hammock. Over years, this can contribute to leaks when you cough, sneeze, laugh, or exercise. Many people assume these leaks are purely because I had kids or because I'm getting older, but inactivity, deconditioning, and weight can play just as big a role as pregnancy and childbirth. On the other side, you can also quietly harm the pelvic floor by overusing it in the wrong way, especially by habitual straining. Think about how many times you've pushed to force urine out faster, or held your breath and bore down to empty your bladder or bowels quickly. That bearing down pressure stretches and strains the pelvic floor and the ligaments that support the organs. Over time, this increases the risk of prolapse when an organ like the bladder or uterus bulges down, and can interfere with the normal coordination between the bladder muscle and the sphincters. It's a habit almost nobody talks about, but power peeing or forcing urine out is something I see all the time. Your bladder has a muscle designed to do the work. Your job is to sit, breathe, and relax, not to push as though you are lifting a heavy weight. Another hidden habit that quietly damages bladder health is ignoring or self-managing urinary infections without proper evaluation. Burning when you pee, strong odor, cloudy urine, pelvic discomfort, needing to go every few minutes, these are not symptoms to simply wait out for weeks. Recurrent or untreated infections can inflame and irritate the bladder lining. Over long periods, that constant inflammation can leave the bladder more sensitive, more painful, and more reactive. Some people reach for home remedies or leftover antibiotics, or they stop medication the moment they feel a bit better. Others feel embarrassed to talk about urinary symptoms and just hope they disappear. Meanwhile, the bacteria and inflammation continue to stir inside an organ that doesn't have much room for error. I want to be very clear. Not every infection becomes something serious. Many are straightforward and treatable. But the everyday habit of minimizing symptoms, of not drinking any fluids because it hurts to pee, of toughing it out instead of being evaluated, puts stress on both the bladder and the kidneys. Listening to your body and seeking appropriate care is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you understand how precious these organs are. Now we have to speak about a habit that affects your whole body, but has a particularly harsh relationship with the bladder: smoking. Most people know smoking is bad for the lungs and heart. Far fewer realize that smoking is also a major risk factor for bladder cancer. The chemicals in tobacco are filtered through the kidneys and concentrated in the urine, where they bathe the bladder lining every time you hold your urine. Over years, that repeated exposure can damage the cells and increase the risk of cancerous changes. Even if cancer never develops, chronic coughing from smoking or other lung issues has its own mechanical consequences. Every cough is a burst of pressure downwards onto the pelvic floor and bladder. If you are coughing many times a day, week after week, year after year, you are essentially doing a negative workout for your bladder support system. Instead of strengthening, constant high-pressure spikes can weaken the muscles and tissues that keep you dry. That's why heavy smokers often complain not only of cough, but of small leaks when the coughing fits come. Then there is the everyday stress that so many people treat as normal. Constant urgency, rushing, multitasking, shallow breathing, never fully relaxing. This is the background music of modern life. Your bladder does not live outside that soundtrack. When your nervous system lives in fight or flight, your muscles, including the pelvic floor, tend to be either too tense or poorly coordinated. The bladder itself is under the control of nerves that respond to emotional and psychological states. Have you ever noticed needing to pee right before a big presentation or exam? That's your nervous system and bladder having a conversation. When chronic stress is never released, when sleep is short and fragmented, when you fall into bed scrolling your phone instead of winding down, your hormones and nervous system stay dysregulated. Nighttime urine production can increase. Your brain's ability to suppress minor urges during sleep decreases, and suddenly you're waking up multiple times a night to pee. Many people blame the bladder alone, but the habit of defending your stress instead of managing it is quietly part of the problem. We also have to mention the way you position your body on the toilet. It sounds ridiculous, but the habit of rushing, hovering over the seat, and never fully relaxing is incredibly common. If you hover, Your pelvic floor stays partially contracted, making it harder for the bladder to empty completely. If you're twisting, clenching your jaw, scrolling your phone, and rushing, you're sending your body the opposite of a relax and release signal. Over time, this pattern can contribute to incomplete emptying and the feeling that you always need to go again shortly after you just went. And then there are the red flag symptoms that people downplay because they're busy, scared, or simply used to tolerating discomfort. Blood in the urine, pain in the side or back, unexplained weight loss, severe burning, or pain with urination, constant nighttime urination that suddenly appears. These are not things to file under annoying, but normal. The daily habit of ignoring warnings because you don't want to be dramatic or inconvenient can delay the diagnosis of serious conditions. Your bladder is not being dramatic when it shows you blood. It's asking for attention. So let's step back. We've walked through habits like chronically holding pee, just in case, peeing, underhydration, irritant drinks, unmanaged constipation, sedentary living, straining, ignoring infections, smoking, living in constant stress, poor toilet posture, and ignoring red flags. You might be thinking, wow, that's a lot. I'm doing half of those. Am I doomed? You are not doomed. But this is your invitation to stop treating bladder problems as a mysterious curse that falls from the sky and start seeing them as an organ's response to years of training. What would a bladder-friendly day actually look like? It doesn't have to be perfect or rigid. Imagine this. You wake up, and instead of immediately grabbing a large sugary coffee, you drink a glass of water. You go to the bathroom when you feel a genuine urge, not just out of habit, and you sit down fully, let your shoulders drop, breathe, and allow your bladder to empty without pushing. You eat meals that include some fiber, fruits, vegetables, whole grains if you tolerate them, so your bowels can move regularly. You move your body, a walk, some stretching, a bit of strength work. Each step and each breath is a tiny message to your pelvic floor and bladder that circulation and coordination still matter. You pay attention to patterns. Maybe you notice that 3 cups of coffee make you run to the bathroom all morning, but 1 cup enjoyed slowly with breakfast doesn't bother you. Maybe you realize that drinking a liter of water right before bed is what's waking you up at night, not the single glass with dinner. You start spacing your fluids, front-loading more in the first half of the day, easing up a little in the last few hours before sleep. You treat constipation as something to solve, not tolerate. More water, more fiber as your body accepts, more movement and responding when your body says it's time to go. You begin to practice gentle pelvic awareness. Not obsessing, not constantly clenching, but learning to feel what relaxation and engagement actually are. When you cough or lift something heavy, you think of supporting your pelvic floor with a small, timed contraction, like giving it a helping hand. You avoid using your pelvic floor like a clamp all day long, constantly sucked in, constantly tight, and instead aim for a balance of strength and softness. Regarding stress, you might not be able to quit your job or erase your responsibilities, but you can change your relationship with your nervous system. A few minutes of slow, deep breathing, especially before bed or before going to the bathroom, can shift your body out of constant emergency mode. Better sleep hygiene, dimming lights earlier, putting screens away, creating a predictable wind-down routine helps your hormones regulate, which in turn affects nighttime urine patterns. If you smoke, this isn't about shame, it's about knowledge. Every cigarette is not only speaking to your lungs, it's also speaking to your bladder lining. If quitting feels overwhelming, consider simply acknowledging this connection as one more real, physical reason to move toward stopping. Seek help. You don't need to do it alone. Your bladder, your kidneys, your whole body will thank you for every step in that direction. And finally, the habit of listening to your body instead of dismissing it may be the single most protective behavior of all. If something changes sharply, more blood, more pain, severe urgency, burning that doesn't settle, back pain, fevers, pay attention. You are not overreacting by getting it checked. You are acting as a responsible guardian of a system that doesn't have a spare. I want to leave you with an image. Imagine your bladder as a quiet coworker you've had for decades. This coworker shows up every day, handles everything you throw at them, rarely complains, and keeps the place running. But imagine that every day, without thinking, you overload their desk, give them impossible deadlines, ignore their emails, snap at them when they make the slightest noise, and then blame them when they finally burn out. That's how many of us treat our bladders. We get frustrated when they become urgent, leaky, or unpredictable, without realizing how long they've been trying to keep up with the lifestyle we gave them. From today on, you have a choice. You can keep pretending your habits don't matter and wait for the next embarrassing accident, the next sleepless night, the next rush to the bathroom that controls your day. Or you can start making small, respectful changes. Drink in a more balanced way. Stop training your bladder to panic over tiny volumes by going just in case 20 times a day. Stop stretching it to its limits by holding it for hours. Give your gut some love so constipation doesn't bully your bladder. Move your body. Sit down, breathe, and let your bladder empty without a fight. Pay attention to the information your urine and your urges are trying to give you, and ask for help when something feels wrong. Your bladder does not need perfection. It needs consistency. It needs you to stop quietly destroying it with normal, common, socially accepted habits and start quietly protecting it with equally normal, simple, sustainable ones. The changes may not feel dramatic in a week, but over months and years, they can be the difference between planning your life around bathrooms and having your bladder fade back into the background where it belongs. This video is not a diagnosis, and it's not a replacement for a personal consultation. But it is a reminder that your everyday choices matter more than you think. If you recognized yourself in what I described, don't use that as a reason to feel guilty. Use it as evidence that there are real, practical things you can start shifting today. Your future self, the one who travels without fear, who sleeps longer without getting up, who trusts their body again, will look back at this moment as the day you stopped ignoring that quiet coworker and finally gave your bladder the respect it has always deserved.